Hi, good morning. Today's topic is dividend policy. Let's look into what's the meaning of dividend. As you all know that dividend is basically known as the remuneration given to the equity shareholders from the profit made by the company. So the dividend, how much amount dividend should be given to the shareholders? What kind of policy has to be adopted by the company for giving the dividend to the equity shareholders? What are the practical aspects to be considered for declaring the dividend to the shareholders? So all these things has to be discussed in the dividend policy. Let's look into what's dividend policy. So definitely a lot of things has to be considered for making the payment of dividend to the shareholders. The first and most important thing is known as financial needs of the company. What are the important types of working capital needs, long-term investment needs, or any other operating requirements needs? This has to be considered before paying the dividend to the shareholders. So it's very important thing to meet all types of the requirements of the company. At the same time, meeting the needs and wants of the shareholders is also necessary. So the shareholders have a lot of expectations. You can see different types of shareholders in the company, old-aged shareholders and young-aged shareholders. So what's the peculiarity of young people? Young people always expect capital gain. They would like to buy the shares at low price and like to sell it at high price and expecting capital gain. But old-aged investors are preferring the companies that paying dividend in a stable manner. Such kind of shareholders' expectation has to be met. So both type of shareholders' expectation should be met by way of adopting an appropriate dividend policy in the company. So this has to be considered. And the third important thing is the constraints on paying dividend to the shareholders. A lot of legal restrictions are actually involving in paying the dividend to the shareholders has to be considered. And there must be some liquidity. Liquid assets should be available in the company for paying the dividend to the shareholders. At the same time, companies should have enough borrowing capacity from banks and financial institutions for paying the dividend to the shareholders. And companies should have more access to the capital market for giving the dividend to the shareholders. So these are some of the practical aspects to be considered for paying the dividend to the shareholders. Financial needs of the company is the key thing. Definitely you must be able to meet the financial needs of the company. And shareholders' expectation is also very important. You must be able to meet each and every shareholder's expectations in that particular company. At the same time, you must consider all kind of constraints that faced by the company for paying the dividend to the shareholders. These are the few things has to be considered before paying the dividend to the shareholders. Let's look into the policies adopted by the company for paying the dividend to the shareholders. Basically, there are three types of dividend policies. The first policy is known as constant dividend per share. What is dividend per share? Dividend per share is known as total dividend divided by number of equity shares is known as dividend per share. So every year company paying dividend per share in the same manner. That's known as constant dividend per share. Suppose if the total dividend amount is 10 lakh rupees and total number of shares is 1 lakh. So 10 lakh divided by 1 lakh, every year the company will pay dividend per share of 10 rupees to the shareholders. This is one type of policy adopted by the company. Second policy is known as constant payout, constant dividend payout. What is that? Dividend payout is actually calculated by using a formula DPS divided by EPS into 100, which means that a certain percentage of dividend will be given from the earnings as remuneration to the shareholders. That ratio is known as dividend payout ratio. So DPS divided by EPS into 100 is known as dividend payout ratio. So the company decided to give every year certain percentage of dividend payout ratio to the shareholders. That's also a stable policy that adopted by the company for declaring the dividend to the shareholders. And third policy is known as constant dividend per share plus extra dividend. Every year, company will pay a certain dividend per share amount to the shareholders. At the same time, a certain amount as extra dividend will be given to the shareholders along with that. That is also known as a policy. So three types of policies are adopted by the company: constant dividend per share, constant dividend payout, and constant dividend per share plus extra dividend. Let's look into the significance of stability of dividend. It's very important that the dividend must be stable in nature. What is the reason for that? There is an uncertainty with the company whether the shareholders will get some kind of remuneration from the company, or shareholders are investing huge amount of money in the company, whether this company's share price will increase or not. So there is an uncertainty involving in that. So definitely the policy must be able to resolve the investors' uncertainty in the company. And the second one is investors' desire for current income. Investors always put their money with an expectation that they will get the earnings regularly from that company. So the current income is very important. At the same time, the company must be able to meet the needs and wants of the institutional investors, LIC, GIC, UTI, foreign investors. All these institutional investors' needs and wants has to be met with the help of an appropriate dividend policy to be maintained by the company, which is a key thing. That is also has to be taken into consideration. Basically, there are two types of dividend given by the company. The first one is known as cash dividend. Cash dividend means dividend will be declared as cash and paid in the form of cash to the shareholders. That is known as cash dividend. And the second one is bonus shares. Company will issue additional shares to the existing shareholders in the form of stock dividends. That's known as bonus shares. You will get, if you hold 5 shares, additionally you can get 5 shares, so you will get total 10 shares. That's known as bonus shares. So these are the types of dividend given by the company to the shareholders. So now you know there are 3 types of policy: constant dividend per share, constant dividend payout, and constant dividend per share plus extra dividend. These are the 3 types of dividend policies adopted by the company. And basically there are 2 types of dividend. One is known as cash dividend and second one is known as bonus shares. Thank you.